How you been, Joey?
Hello. Good to see you.
How'd all these people get in your room?
You're gonna start already, huh?
No, I'm not starting.
How are you?
I'm almost through.
Johnny Carson had to deal with all kinds of guests on his show. Big Hollywood names showing up so faded they could barely remember their own names. Oscar winners storming onto the stage, grabbing Johnny's note cards and tossing them like confetti in front of millions. Some moments were fun, light chaos, but others turned into straight-up live TV disasters that left the whole crew sweating behind the scenes. These are the 10 most out-of-control drunk guests Johnny Carson ever faced on The Tonight Show. Stay locked in because some of these stories get unbelievably wild. Number 1, Dean Martin. Dean had a habit of strolling out from behind the curtain already holding a drink, but once he sat down,
You weren't on last night.
I certainly was.
You were not. I watched that little girl sing.
What little girl sing?
One of the angels, Cheryl Ladd.
No, you were watching Charlie's. No,
that was Monday night.
That was Monday night.
I wasn't here then.
No, that was Monday night.
They had that Rainier guy from... Oh, no, Bob Reiner.
Rob Reiner.
Rob, yeah.
Huh?
cracks started showing. He stumbled over setups, slurred punchlines, and sometimes greeted Johnny like they were meeting for the very first time, even though they'd done this dance for years. At first, the audience laughed because they thought it was all part of Dean's act, until they slowly realized something wasn't right. What seemed effortless on his own variety show suddenly felt shaky under Carson's tighter, fast-paced format, and the room could feel the difference. Johnny tried to roll with it, tossing Dean easy setups, little softball questions he could normally crush in his sleep. Instead, Dean would randomly cut him off mid-sentence, drift into half-finished stories, or stand up and wander toward the band like he forgot he was still on national TV. He mixed up movie titles, forgot what project he was promoting, and would suddenly freeze mid-story like the thought just fell right out of his mind. Producers started quietly padding the schedule whenever Dean was booked because his segments could go long, stall out, or force an emergency commercial break at any moment. The legend was still in there. You could see flashes of the old charm, but each appearance felt like a coin toss between Dean Martin and a man struggling to hold on to the superstar persona millions knew him for. Number 2. Ed McMahon. This one shocked viewers because Ed wasn't just some random guest. He was Johnny's right-hand man, the steady voice, the reliable sidekick who never slipped. Except for one unforgettable night when he introduced Joan Emery from the San Diego Zoo, and everyone saw immediately that something was off. Ed was noticeably drunk, swaying a little and fixating on how many years Joan had been coming on the show. Was it 7 years? 8? 9? He kept going back and forth, insisting he was right, even when he was clearly getting it wrong, and the audience didn't know whether to laugh or look away. Johnny tried steering the segment back on track, but Ed drifted into slurred stories about baby lions that didn't connect to anything happening on stage. Carson kept trying to regain control, gently teasing Ed about needing a nap and asking him to snap out of it, but the moment was already spiraling in front of millions. But Ed kept flipping between defensive and strangely sentimental, like he couldn't decide if he wanted to argue or hug somebody. Through the whole meltdown, he kept interrupting Joan's intro, jumping in at random moments, getting emotional for no clear reason, then slipping into total confusion about what he had just said seconds earlier. Johnny finally hit his limit and rushed to bring Joan out early just to save the segment before it crashed even harder. It became one of the few Tonight Show moments where the usually polished Ed McMahon showed up visibly intoxicated, rambling, argumentative, completely off his rhythm, and Johnny had to jump into full damage control mode live on air. Number 3, Truman Capote. In 1980, Capote arrived severely intoxicated and delivered one of the most uncomfortable interviews in Tonight Show history. People knew he had a reputation for this kind of behavior on other shows, but nothing prepared them for how bad it got that night. He could barely make it to the guest chair. His feet shuffled like he was trying not to fall, and he steadied himself on Johnny's desk before collapsing into the seat. His eyes were glassy, and Johnny greeted him hoping things wouldn't be as bad as they looked. But somehow, it was even worse. Capote slurred nearly every word, and most of what he said was completely impossible to understand. The audience sat in stunned silence. This was Truman Capote, the man who wrote In Cold Blood, one of the most celebrated American authors ever, and he couldn't even form a clear sentence on national TV. When Carson asked about his latest writing project, Capote drifted into a bizarre story about a party in the Hamptons and somebody's dog, and nobody could follow a single part of it. He'd start a sentence and forget the rest, then jump to a new sentence and forget that one too, leaving everyone confused and worried at the same time. Then, out of nowhere, he turned toward Ed McMahon and seriously asked if he could sit in his lap.
About 9 years.
Right, yeah. Several plus several would be about 9.
You said 7 or 8.
No, I
It's
said,
been-
no, I didn't say 7 or 8. I said several.
Then you said 7 or 8, and I said
Did
it's
I?
9. Yes.
9. Good, thank you.
Some of the animals you had as babies are now 10 years old.
That would be about right.
Ed laughed nervously while Johnny scrambled to redirect the conversation, and Capote grabbed a glass of water but nearly missed his mouth. The rim hit his chin, and water spilled down his shirt without him even noticing. The crowd wasn't laughing anymore. The vibe shifted from awkward to downright scary. After around 7 minutes, Johnny cut to an early commercial break, came back for a couple more minutes, then ended the segment for good. Capote shuffled back through the curtain, and he was never invited back again. The clip became infamous, a Pulitzer-winning author appearing so intoxicated he could barely stay upright on live television. Number 4. Shelley Winters. Shelley had a long history of showing up sloshed, but her 1974 appearance became legendary chaos the moment she walked through that curtain. She came in like a whole storm, interrupting Johnny nonstop, talking over him, cutting off the other guests, and refusing to let anyone else get a word out. There were 2 other guests there that night, and Shelley made it completely impossible for them to speak. She ignored every question Johnny asked and launched into wild rants about people no one had ever heard of, leaving the audience and the other guests completely lost. One young actor was there to promote his first major film, the biggest night of his career, and Shelley turned toward him, grabbed his knee tightly, and started roasting his movie on national TV like she didn't care who was watching. She called the film boring, said his performance was stiff, and the poor guy just froze with this horrified smile, not knowing what to do. Johnny tried to stick up for the young actor, but Shelley wasn't hearing a single thing he said. Then she spotted Johnny's note cards on the desk, the carefully prepared questions written by the Tonight Show writers, and without warning, she reached across, snatched the whole stack right out of Johnny's hands, and tossed them over her shoulder like trash. The cards flew across the floor, and the entire room froze. Carson just stared at her, completely speechless. He had never had a guest pull something like that on live television. The audience gasped loud enough to shake the studio, but Shelley kept talking like nothing unusual had happened at all. After about 12 minutes of chaos, Johnny finally surrendered, looked straight into the camera, and announced an early commercial break just to get control back. After the show, NBC producers hit their breaking point and officially blacklisted Shelley Winters. They told her agent she wasn't welcome back, and the ban lasted nearly 3 years. When she finally returned, somebody made sure she understood the rules. Show up sober, respect the room, and definitely do not attack other guests again. Number 5. Orson Welles. Orson often drank before his Tonight Show appearances, but his 1975 visit was on another level completely. He had reportedly put away multiple bottles of wine before even arriving at the studio, and crew members said they watched him sipping more in his dressing room right up until showtime. When he walked out, you could see he was tipsy, but he was also Orson Welles, so he was charming, brilliant, dramatic, and totally intoxicated all at once. Johnny asked him one simple question, and Orson launched into a 14-minute monologue without taking a breath. He started with deep Shakespeare analysis that was actually pretty sharp, then drifted into stories about his film career, then swung back to theater history, then veered off into a random tale about a Hungarian director nobody had ever heard of. At one point, he tried quoting Hamlet, made it 3 lines in, forgot the real text, and started inventing entirely new Shakespeare-sounding lines.
Remember the animals that did something funny on your tie?
Yes,
Those little lions and little baby lions were 1 year old.
that's right.
They are now treacherous and ferocious 10-year-old animals.
Okay. Anyway, Joan Embry is here tonight.
And she's now 32.
That's right.
But delivered them with so much confidence, the audience just went with it. Johnny sat there drained, waiting for even a sliver of space to jump in. But Orson never gave him one. 14 straight minutes of unstoppable Welles. Johnny shot the camera a look that basically screamed, "I have lost all control of this show." The audience, though, was glued to him. because even when he was gone off too much wine, Orson Welles was still more fascinating than most sober guests. Despite the chaos, Johnny kept inviting him back, because when Orson was on point, he was absolutely brilliant. You just never knew which version you were gonna get. Number 6, Oliver Reed. Oliver is the only person on this list who almost didn't make it on air at all, because Johnny Carson didn't want to take that gamble. Reed was booked for a 1973 appearance during the height of his rising movie career, and on paper, it should have been great television. But NBC executives had seen the tapes of his recent drunken meltdowns on other talk shows, threatening to do inappropriate stunts on air, insulting hosts right to their faces, demanding alcohol mid-interview, and even getting physically aggressive. They brought the footage to Johnny, and after watching Oliver behave wildly on other programs, Johnny made the call instantly. He canceled the appearance completely and pulled the plug before anything could happen. Oliver Reed never made it onto The Tonight Show, not once during Johnny Carson's entire 30-year run. Afterward, Reed mocked Johnny in public, calling him scared and uptight. But Johnny had seen enough wild behavior from guests over the years and wasn't about to add Oliver Reed to that hall of chaos. Hit that like and subscribe button if you're vibing with the story so far. Let's keep it moving.
Well, I've been to bed, but
To sleep is what I meant.
A number of people.
Can I ask you some serious questions?
Sure, you can go right in.
All right.
I feel perfectly
Have you been
fine.
drinking?
You mean very lately?
You have had a history of alcoholism. Millions of people out there have
My
also had
God,
the same problem.
alcohol isn't the least of it.
Number 7, Peter O'Toole. O'Toole could show up as pure brilliance or pure mayhem depending on the day, and his 1978 appearance delivered both at the exact same time. He arrived after a heavy afternoon of drinking. You could practically smell it when he sat down. Carson asked him about Lawrence of Arabia, and O'Toole ignored the question completely. Instead, he went into this deep, brilliant lecture on acting techniques, genuinely incredible stuff, then suddenly spiraled into confused rambling that didn't connect to anything. Then right back to brilliance, then back to rambling again. It was like flipping channels without a remote. He grabbed Johnny's pen and turned it into a fencing foil, forcing Johnny into an on-the-spot fencing lesson right there on live TV. Johnny was laughing, but you could see him trying to get control back before things went too left. Then O'Toole launched into wild drinking stories about Richard Harris, stories that probably should have stayed off television. But somehow the whole thing stayed charming instead of collapsing. The audience loved him, Johnny loved him too, and chaos or not, he kept inviting O'Toole back because even sloppy Peter O'Toole was more entertaining than most sober guests. Number 8, Foster Brooks. Foster was famous for his inebriated stage character, the slurred words, the stumbling, the forgetfulness, but at least 2 of his Tonight Show appearances were influenced by actual pre-show drinks. Brooks usually had a small drink before performing to get into character, but every now and then he went a little too far. During one appearance, he slipped out of character mid-bit and began slurring for real, losing track of his own routine. The polished act turned into the real thing, and anyone watching close could see the difference. Johnny picked up on it instantly and jumped into rescue mode, turning the moment into comedy without embarrassing Brooks and playing along like it was part of the plan. But backstage, the crew said it plain. Foster was acting drunk and actually drunk at the same time. The line between performance and reality completely blurred that night. Number 9, Robert Blake. Blake had several tense Tonight Show visits, but one in particular stood out. He showed up after drinking heavily backstage, and multiple staffers said his mood was full-on liquid courage. He came out confrontational, interrupting Johnny nonstop while Johnny was trying to keep the show running for viewers at home. Johnny tried steering him toward plugging his film. That's literally why actors get booked. But instead, Blake launched into a rant about Hollywood phoniness, tearing into the industry on live TV while promoting his own movie at the same time. It made absolutely no sense. After the taping, Johnny told producers to avoid booking Blake anytime he'd had even a sip to drink. It became an unofficial backstage rule. Check with his team first, make sure he's arriving sober, because wasted Robert Blake was unpredictable, intense, and simply not worth the gamble. The wildest part was how fast Blake's energy could swing. Calm one second, fiery the next, and you never knew which version was about to appear on camera. When Blake first walked through the curtain, the crowd applauded like always, expecting that usual tough guy swagger he brought to every talk show. But the vibe shifted fast. The moment he sat down, he started bouncing his leg, tapping his fingers, and staring into the audience like he was daring somebody to test him. His eyes were wide, unfocused, and carrying an energy nobody could quite read. Johnny opened with a harmless question about Blake's latest project, but Blake didn't even pretend to answer it. He jumped straight into a story about working as a child actor on studio backlots, telling it with this jittery intensity that made the whole room go silent. Then out of nowhere, he snapped back to the present and started accusing modern actors of never earning their success. Johnny tried cracking a joke to lighten the mood, but Blake didn't react at all. He just kept going like a runaway train with no brakes. Every time Johnny tried to guide things back onto the rails, Blake swerved hard in another direction. One minute he was acting out a fight scene from his new movie, the next he was ranting about agents, producers, and casting directors who, in his words, had no business deciding anybody's future. More than once, Johnny shot Ed McMahon that classic raised eyebrow look, the one that silently said, "We're losing this interview fast." Ed didn't jump in. He just gave a tiny nod like, "Yep, we're in trouble." The audience kept giving these nervous little laughs at moments that weren't even jokes, and Johnny had to smile through it all like a referee trying to control a game that was already slipping away. Then Blake suddenly stood up, no cue, no warning, acting out some wild story about a director he once worked with, and the camera operator scrambled to keep him in frame. Carson lifted his hands gently, trying to get him to sit down before the whole set turned into a stage play. But Blake wasn't done. He leaned right over Johnny's desk and launched into another intense monologue about the pressure of surviving decades in the industry. It wasn't straightforward anger. It was scattered, emotional, unpredictable, like he was unpacking years of frustration right there on live TV. Most guests treated The Tonight Show like a chance to shine, but Blake treated it like a courtroom where he had to argue for his entire legacy. Backstage staff froze, unsure if they should cut to commercial early, because nobody knew which direction he was heading next. Johnny usually refused to embarrass guests unless they gave him absolutely no choice, so he kept tossing Blake simple questions, softballs about the movie, the director, even the weather, just hoping something might slow him down and reset the vibe. But Blake brushed each one off like a fly and kept circling back to old grudges, scattered thoughts, and whatever popped into his mind in the moment. Next, you could practically see Johnny doing the math in real time. How do I keep this watchable without turning it into a public scolding? But Blake steamrolled every single attempt. Carson finally managed to squeeze in a polite transition and thank him for coming. But Blake kept talking, even as the band kicked in for commercial. Johnny slowly stood up and placed a hand on Blake's shoulder in a quiet signal that said, "We're done now," without saying it out loud. Blake finally got the hint, and as they cut to break, the audience gave that weird half-applause people do when they can't tell if something was funny or kind of alarming. Johnny flashed his trademark smile for the camera, but the second the red light shut off, his whole expression dropped. He walked straight back to his desk. No jokes with the band, no playful moment, just pure exhaustion. Blake stayed planted in his chair, still talking to anyone who'd listen. His voice was lower now, but the energy hadn't calmed one bit. A stagehand leaned in and quietly asked him to head backstage, and Blake just shrugged like nothing unusual had happened, shuffling off while muttering about phonies. In the control room, the director and producers were talking over each other. Could they edit around it for the West Coast? Was anything legally risky? Did he name anyone directly? They replayed chunks of the segment with the sound muted, just watching the body language. Carson leaning back, Ed staring forward, nervous laughter breaking out in random pockets of the audience. You didn't need audio to see how tense the room had been. Finally, one associate producer said what everyone was thinking. "We can never let that happen again." Backstage, the vibe stayed tight. Staff avoided walking near Blake's dressing room. Nobody wanted to get caught in another hallway monologue that lasted 20 minutes. Carson eventually came through, still in his suit, tie loosened just a little. Polite as always, but very firm. He thanked Blake for coming and said he appreciated the visit, but the tone wasn't warm at all. As soon as Blake left the building, Johnny turned to his producer and kept it simple. "Next time, we need to know what we're getting. If he's had anything to drink, we pass." That conversation became policy within hours. Bookers added a quiet note next to Blake's name. Confirm state before arrival, check with publicist. If there's even a hint he's been at the bar, suggest another date or another show entirely. It wasn't personal, it was survival. Carson's whole empire relied on him, keeping live chaos just controlled enough to stay entertaining. And the moment they cleared that stage, relief washed through the building. One crew member later said it felt like walking out of a room where someone was shouting, but you weren't allowed to leave. Johnny headed straight to his producer, not angry, but clear. Blake was too unpredictable, too emotional, too much of a wild card when he'd been drinking. A talk show host can work around almost anything. Nervous guests, boring guests, guests who talk too long, but not someone who takes the entire show hostage with pure volatility. From that point on, there was a standing order. Confirm Blake is sober before booking. If there was even the slightest sign he'd been drinking, reschedule or pass entirely. Everyone knew sober Blake was manageable. But the other Blake was chaos waiting to explode. All of the personalities on this list proved that even on the most tightly controlled show on TV, chaos always found a crack to slip through. Carson spent 30 years juggling wild guests with grace and fast thinking. Some he handled with humor, some he cut off with an early commercial, and some he never allowed back on the stage again. But these moments remind us that live TV is never fully in anyone's hands. Sometimes someone walks through that curtain drunk, and all you can do is survive the next 7 minutes. Which of these guest stories shocked you the most? Are there other notorious Tonight Show drunk moments RumorFame should break down next? Drop your take in the comments, hit that like button, share this video, and make sure you subscribe to RumorFame so you never miss the next wild story. See you on the next one.